All right, welcome everyone to our webinar, Your Network and the Hybrid Workplace. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Maddie Regis. I am the Marketing Content Coordinator with NetGain Technologies, and with me today are two gentlemen who have some networking expertise. So I will go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Russ?
Yes, thanks for having us today. My name is Russ Boyd. I'm the systems engineer for Aruba Networks that covers pretty much everything in Kentucky, a few things in southern Indiana, but more specifically am here to support NetGain as one of our vital partners. I've been in the networking world for over 20 years, started about kind of the late 1990s. Spent most of that career as an end user or a network administrator for a very large enterprise. And while I was with that organization, I was introduced to Aruba. And it's kind of funny. I probably chased Aruba for a little while, for a couple of years, and about 3 years ago, I was lucky enough to start my career here at Aruba. So it's fantastic to be here.
Thanks so much, Russ. Thanks for joining us. Jake?
Yes, my name is Jake Aker. I'm a senior consulting engineer with NetGain. I've been here for about 3 years now, but I also have about 20 years of networking experience. I worked for a few very large companies, and worked in the small, medium-sized business. Most of my experience has been in design and implementation, and I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. So let's go ahead and jump into our content. So I think, first of all, I think some people in the audience may not be as aware of Aruba as some of our other partners. So I just wanted to give Russ an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about Aruba and what they do and what services they have available.
Yeah, thanks. So for those that don't know, Aruba Networks has been closely associated with wireless really since its inception in 2002. At that point, one of our founders is Kirti Mikote. He and a few others started looking at the wireless world, and at that point it was insecure. There was issues with encryption. The very early days of the industry. So they kind of looked at wireless and knew where it was going. It was going to be the future of connectivity at the edge of everybody's network, and they wanted to approach it slightly different. They wanted to approach it as what, we need to make sure that we are securing that edge of the network. So Aruba was really focused on security from the beginning, security and wireless. Everybody that connects into an Aruba network is assigned a user role. So we're very role based. We want to make sure we know what is connecting to the network and what they have access to. So really, since that time in 2002, we've been a market leader really the entire time. We started, obviously in wireless LAN, becoming a market leader. During our course, we purchased and integrated a product called ClearPass, which is our NAC solution, and really vital for securing that edge of the network again. Always focusing in on what was out there at the edge and what's coming into the network. And then, the growth has just been phenomenal. And then in 2016, most everybody knows that, Aruba Networks is now a Hewlett-Packard enterprise company. And while HPE purchased Aruba Networks, in some ways it was as much a merger. The HPE saw what Aruba was doing. They liked the approach. HPE gave Aruba the entire networking portfolio and said, we want you to be our networking arm. We didn't get incorporated in. If you notice, everything that we ship and everything that you see from Aruba is still Aruba Networks. And also along those lines, we still have the same leader. Kirti Mikote is the CIO of Aruba. He still leads Aruba. Of course, he answers to HPE, but we have had the same leadership from inception to today, and really having that consistency of direction and consistency of story, and consistency of platform. We're not, we've obviously purchased a few companies here and there to integrate with, But our wireless story has been our wireless story, from inception. And really having that consistency of direction, that consistency of story, that continuously being a market leader, not only in wireless, but also in network access control, and now in wired with the HPE acquisition, and even SD-WAN and SD branch. So again, we've got a very consistent direction, been a market leader in just about everything we do, and it's all been a focus on the edge of the network. And how do you treat those devices at your edge correctly? How do you secure those devices, which is where ClearPass comes in. And the other part is that we saw that need for securing the edge. So instead of putting firewalls at the middle of the network and wireless just being a way to get on board, we actually put firewalling functionality in all of our endpoint devices. So all of our access points, all of our controllers, all of our gateways have advanced layer 4 through 7 firewalling and application visibility built in. And again, it's that focus on the edge all along. And specifically, as we talk about the hybrid workplace today during the conversation, we've had a solution in place for over 10 years called a remote access point, where, again, because we have a consistency of platform, you can take any one of our access points and convert it into what we've always called a remote access point that an end user can take home, take on the road, take really anywhere, connect it into any open network. And that remote access point will extend the corporate network, corporate policy, corporate security, all the way out to the end user. And I actually have one of those with me today, or at least the type of device that we use in general. It's a little small access point, several Ethernet ports on the bottom, and we'll kind of go through how this is used during the course of the conversation. But the important part is that we've always supported a hybrid workplace. As a matter of fact, I think we're the industry leader in supporting that, because we've always known that people can be effective and can work from home. And of course, the things that have happened over the last year just further enforce that.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Russ, for that introduction to Aruba. And yeah, a lot of that will come into play today as we kind of discuss networking and how it's been affected and what considerations to make as we move to a hybrid workplace solution. So with that, let's talk a little bit about that. So, I think over the past year, obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had kind of a rapid shift to everyone having to work remotely for their own safety. And then as we've, continued on, I think a lot of organizations are realizing, hey, this is something that we're actually going to do for the long term. So whether it's fully remote or kind of a hybrid combination of some in-person work and some remote work, this is something that is here to stay. And obviously that affects every part of business operations, all technology, including your network. So Russ, why don't you speak a little bit about that, and then I'll throw it over to Jake.
Yeah, so at Aruba we've seen this. We've always supported the remote workforce, but that in the last year you really saw drastic changes. You saw an instantaneous work from home workforce. Both my wife and daughter were sent home, and they spent weeks trying to figure out, how to get connected, how to scale. So you have that instantaneous switch from everybody being in a controlled environment to all of your employees being spread out. And because of that, with that instantaneous change in workforce, your support needs for remote workers exponentially went up. You're talking about scaling. How do you scale your network to support that environment? One thing that did happen when you sent everybody home as well is that IT groups have a very fixed IT support structure. And, unfortunately, that in general seems to be decreasing instead of increasing. So now you've got the same IT staff that had to manage a very controlled environment suddenly having to control or manage a very uncontrollable environment to some extent. Everybody's got their own internet connections, everybody's network I'm sorry, everybody's network is a little different. So, all of these things, kind of came into play. And then as people are going home, how do you provide the same user experience to all of your employees, just like you would if they were in your office? And that was something that, a lot of customers struggled with. And again, Aruba had a very specific, Aruba's always supported that infrastructure. So, we have and you may see the word an edge services platform mentioned, which is it's not really a product, it's more of a mindset. It involves, how do you make that edge something easy to manage, easy to control, easy to secure, and easy to deploy and easy to use on your user side. So that makes use of our cloud management platform, Aruba Central, and uses a lot of machine learning and AI ops within that platform, really to kind of monitor your network, point out where you might have issues. And then the other vital piece of this was having a unified infrastructure. Nobody wants to, okay, everybody's working from home, we have to deploy a whole new infrastructure. With Aruba and our cloud-based management, it's the same management platform, it's the same hardware. You just deploy it slightly different, whether you're deploying it in your office or whether you're sending devices home for your users. It's incredibly important to have that unified infrastructure. And then the other piece that we've all seen, or that we've seen a lot of people be concerned with, and that we handle that with we have a zero trust security model. Like I said, everybody that connects into a Aruba network is assigned a user role. And the default user role is that we don't know who you are and we don't trust you. And as you have a network that's spread out all over the place in people's homes, that's incredibly important. So really, tying those three features together with our edge services platform and approach, has really kind of helped assist with that work shift. Yeah. And how do you handle all that from a networking perspective?
Absolutely. Jake, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I would add that definitely one of the reasons we partnered with Aruba was they did have a very good portfolio for this type of environment. And when the pandemic hit, it really enabled us to highlight not only to IT but also to end users how easy it was for the solution to transition as the network gets less and less physically location based. You've seen it over the years with Azure, cloud services, AWS. Now that's working from home is another physical shift of where your data and assets and your workforce is from. And Aruba really has highlighted and made that easier, not just for users, but IT staff. From a managed service provider, from on-site IT staff, you basically just configure a template, if you will, for a remote user, and you just deploy it to, it scales very, very well from 5 users to 50 users to 100 users. It really doesn't matter. The architecture can support that kind of load, and I think that's really important to highlight in this remote workforce type environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, with these considerations, with this shift and this sort of multi-location kind of setup with people working from home, a question we've seen from a lot of organizations is, what kind of solutions, what kind of considerations are needed for my technological environment and my network in this new environment? And I think that's obviously an excellent question. There's a lot of different considerations to be made. So we're going to kind of go through some of those considerations and what you should be thinking about when you're assessing your network and sort of planning ahead for the management of your network with this hybrid work environment. But before we go ahead and get into those points, I would love to know from the audience, what kind of challenges are you having around your network? What sort of considerations are you thinking about at the moment? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll here and just give everyone a second to answer it. But I think, Jake, from your perspective as someone who's also, worked from home in addition to managing networks, Have you, what do you feel is your biggest challenge as you've kind of seen over the course of the pandemic from connectivity or network visibility or security? What's your opinion on that?
I definitely think that securing the network, allowing remote access, I think really is nothing new these days, but making policy and security a forefront of who is accessing your network, but also what devices are accessing your network, not just providing just user credentials, but making sure that that is a corporate authorized device that's connecting back, that has all of its antivirus, things that that it's got all of its updates. So when it does connect, that you're as secure as you can be, especially in this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is exactly what our audience is feeling as well. It seems like most people are concerned with securing their network as we kind of move to this 50-50 remote and in-person work. So that's good to know, and we'll keep that in mind as we continue on with our content. So we'll start off with a couple of our different considerations here for what you need to think about when managing your network. Obviously, Russ touched on connectivity and Jake did as well, just being able to connect to the corporate network and kind of having that ease of access. You want to be able to, whether you're working from home or in the office, you want to be able to get things done and not have too many hangups there. So Russ, I'll go ahead and throw that point to you first to speak on connectivity and how that applies to your network.
Yeah, and I really kind of look at this in two aspects. I mean, like Jake said, remote access and like VPN clients have been around for a long time, but those are not always easy to secure. You don't always have, it's kind of like a BYOD environment. You don't always have a lot of control over the device. And the other part, most everybody these days will have connectivity of some kind. But you never know what that is. You never know what the speeds are. You never know what the SLAs are. And as somebody that's trying to support your end users and provide a solid positive experience, that's something that's completely out of your control. You don't know how people's home networks are set up. And in honesty, most home network Wi-Fi's, they're customer based, they're home based, they're not enterprise scale, they're not enterprise quality. So you have that piece that you really have no control over. So what you really need to do is, how do you offset that with something you do have control over? And that's where the Aruba solution and the remote access solution, the remote access point solution, and you'll hear me go back and forth between remote access point and micro branch. It's the same mindset and same architecture, just slightly different deployment model. That micro branch solution, which is where you have an enterprise quality device that is managed by your IT staff, that is sitting there at a customer site, where you can gain the same types of insight into their experience, the same types of monitoring and analyzation of their traffic, of their connectivity, of their experience, and even the visibility into how they're working. With this device, you can actually gain that even when you have a remote workforce. So your IT staff can look and see, before they get a phone call in from a certain user, that they can actually see what that experience is. You can know immediately, is that a problem with your side of the network, or is it maybe a problem with with their ISP? And more importantly, because you actually are putting your own access point out there to deploy for the end user, you have complete control, and really better control, over that corporate policy. Just like you have control over the corporate policy on what people can access when they're in your building, you have the exact same control at home now, because all you're doing is extending your network connectivity to their home office. So you have the ability to make sure that, the only devices that are allowed to connect are the corporate device you gave them, or the printer you gave them, or the phone you gave them. when you start sending printers and some of these other types of devices that home workers have home, they're plugging it into their home network again, which means that it's available to the internet. It's available to all sorts of things that you don't have any control over with. So to secure that, you need to be able to make sure that corporate devices are connecting to corporate managed endpoints, which is where a remote access point and micro branch solution really comes into play.
Absolutely. Russ, what do you have to add to that point? I'm sorry, Jake.
Yeah. Yeah, Russ hit on a lot of good points there. I would just highlight too that connectivity, the faster that you can on-ramp workers' connectivity back to the corporate network, the more efficient your IT staff's going to become. The more they have to troubleshoot VPN client software or training users how to use a VPN client, the more disruptive not only the workers' workflow is, but the IT staff. And it just becomes a hurdle that becomes just a lot to overcome. Like Russ was mentioning with the remote access point solution, connectivity really is just sending a device to the user's house or having them pick it up in the office and bring it home and connecting it in just like they would any device in their cubicle or office space. I think that really lightens the burden on local IT and also makes users a little bit more efficient on a workday.
Yeah, it makes them a little more independent.
Yeah, and just kind of along those same lines is that you don't want your end users to have to configure their connectivity to your corporate network. You want to just give them the devices they need to work from home, plug it all up, and let them go.
Absolutely, yeah, makes it a little easier and simpler for everyone for sure. And then I think one of the most important things that is always top of mind is our next bullet point, which is security. I think that's something that is always on everyone's mind in terms of technology. Clearly, we saw from the poll that a lot of the organizations that are on our webinar today are definitely concerned about securing the network. So I know that creating a policy in terms of access and who can connect to the network is super important, and then also being able to kind of see into the network to know if there's something that's going wrong, kind of being able to pinpoint that issue and say, okay, let's secure this, let's kind of remediate this issue. I know those are some important things, but Jake, I'd love to hear your sort of take on the considerations for securing your network with this remote workspace.
Yeah, I think that's a really important, obviously with the poll answers there, it's a really important aspect on everybody's mind. And the Aruba solution, Russ hit it on earlier with the definition of these, what's called roles. Roles, think of roles as type of access control. Your typical access control would be, this user's IP can only get to these certain IPs. Well, a role you can really define as not just source destination type network stuff, but you can also get into what user, what kind of device can connect back. We were talking about shipping remote access points to users' homes. If, say, kids are also doing remote working now, and they are pretty savvy these days, so that would not be a surprise to me that a kid would plug a device right up to one of those open ports and try to connect just to get their YouTube video going. With the ClearPass and remote access point solution with these definition of roles, even if that person knew the username and password to get onto the corporate network, it doesn't recognize the device, so you're not going to get access anywhere. It'll just block it right there at that source. And I think that's a really good point to bring home when you're extending corporate access into users' homes. You have to think about not only your employee, but people who are in that same physical space of your employee and what they could possibly do. And really with the Aruba solution, it kind of puts a nice bow on the end of that, saying that it really doesn't matter. Even if they walk away with the device, The device itself has to get its configuration from Aruba Central. So even if they factory reset it, they won't be able to get any kind of access to that device or access from that device.
Yeah, Russ, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's right on. The Aruba has I mentioned it earlier, a zero trust security model and controls in place. So using that role-based access, we're not only allowing access to a user, we're actually going to identify and make sure that device is one that has been authenticated and is authorized to be on the network. So that zero trust security controls combined with ClearPass Policy Manager, which we mentioned earlier, which is really the secret sauce that sits in the background, and it identifies the person, and identifies the device, and identifies, are they home, or are they back in their office? And it takes all of that into consideration to assign that user role. And then the user role isn't just simply yes or no, you're on the network. The user role is based on what that device needs. Printers would be a prime example. That if you have users taking printers home or phones home, there's nothing that guarantees they're not connecting that into their home network at first by accident. And so when they bring that back and forth between a private network to the corporate network, well, you don't want that printer to have access to anything it doesn't need access to. Really, it's that same zero. Don't trust any of the devices unless you know who they are, you know what they are, and they're authorized to get on your network. Like Jake said, it's not just the people that are working from home. For the last year, it's all of our kids. It's everybody's taking doing school at home. We had at my home, we had 3 different people working for 3 different companies, the majority of the summer, everybody accessing different things. So it's incredibly vitally important to control who is accessing those corporate resources through the Aruba solution. And another piece is you don't want any traffic ever to be open. I mean, you want to make sure things are encrypted. With the device I showed you, that device forms a VPN tunnel and encrypts everything that comes out of it all the way back to your corporate headquarters. And not only that, it can encrypt all the traffic that's over the air in their homes. And then we talked a little bit about the device. You actually have network ports on the bottom of it, so that way that it's if you have other devices, you could even have laptops plugged directly into that device, and not even worry about anything over the air. So having that encryption end to end is vital. Having that zero trust mentality is vital. And because this is all one unified infrastructure, you can take the security policies you have for network access in your corporate office, in your traditional brick and mortar buildings. You take that exact same corporate policy and you extend that all the way out to the home office and the home workplace. So that way, again, you're not having to duplicate efforts. You're going to deploy the same security models. And then, and Jake brought up a really good point today and a couple of other times recently is, what happens? It's a physical hardware device. What happens if it's lost? What happens if it's taken? All of the configuration for that device originates in our cloud-based management platform. So if a customer gets access to it, they don't have access to any corporate info. They can factory default it. It's going to go get its configuration from Aruba Central again. But more importantly, even if they have the device, they can try to connect any device they have to it. And ClearPass and the security policies you have in place aren't going to allow anything to connect to it and have unauthorized access. So, again, that security mindset, security focus is really at the front of the micro branch and remote access point solution.
Yeah, and I think regardless of what solution you use, I think that's a great point of basically trying to branch out the corporate policy into the remote work policy is an excellent point to make. So, all right, well, let's keep rolling here with some of our other considerations. I know that Jake brought up earlier, obviously with the hybrid combination of corporate office and remote work, with IT managing all of that, it can be, a lot to have to keep on top of. They've got a lot of different things they have to do. They have to troubleshoot, help people get things set up. So I think that another consideration is how easy it is to manage that architecture of the network. So Jake, I'll have you kind of speak to that a little bit first.
Yeah, definitely from a consultant standpoint, from my standpoint, it is vital to have an architecture that's not only efficient and secure and does what it says it does, but also ease of deployment and management of that is just vital to our success, not only our success, but our customers' success. And the ability to have with the Aruba solution, the ability to have a single pane of glass view into the network, not only from just a access standpoint, but also from a security and auditing standpoint. When did that device connect? When did that user authenticate? Where did they authenticate from? All these things are really important to just your corporate security stance and ease for IT staff to deploy and also support that type of environment. Like Russ talked earlier about roles, I think Aruba's done a really good job of layering the security all the way through their products, all the way from switching ClearPass to the SD-WAN, SD-branch, wireless, switchboard access. Even they do even have a VPN software client if that's the only option you have. All of them understand these concepts of roles, and that just makes it so much easier for an IT staff and support to find out what the policy is and make sure that they have the least amount of access they need possible to make their work day flow. I also want to add that the ease of architecture plays into the fact of we have a lot of customers who don't have Aruba throughout their entire stack. They don't have it for wireless and switch and ClearPass. But what really makes Aruba is really third-party friendly. So you could start out with something like a ClearPass and a wireless solution and kind of expand that into encompass all of your IT needs, or just keep it as modular as you want. I think it really plays well with other vendors, and it makes it pretty unique in that space.
Definitely. Russ, what do you have to say about architecture?
Well, those are fantastic points. It's because you'll hear me talk a lot about Central, and we do. Our cloud-based platform is used to manage everything in our portfolio from a hardware perspective. So it can be used to manage our wireless, our wired, our SD-WAN solutions, but it doesn't have to be everything because it is that single pane of glass. You can deploy what you need. Aruba has a long history of integration with third parties. As a matter of fact, we kind of pride ourselves in being very industry standard, so that you can use the Aruba solution for where it fits in your environment. But it's not a forklift. You don't have to go all Aruba. But at the same time, we use that Aruba Central platform to manage, not only this micro branch solution. As Jake said, we have a VPN client that would terminate on the same hardware that the micro branch clients do or customers do. So again, having that easy to use architecture. We also are very big on investment protection. So in other words, we don't have access points that are only good for micro branch or remote access. All of our access points do this. So, we've even got a customer that during the last year that they've literally taken APs down, that they had deployed in their office because nobody's there, and turned those into micro branch and wrap solutions and give them to their end users so they can take home and use. So again, it's a very easy to use architecture. It's all managed in one place. You can deploy the exact same environments in both your offices and your remote sites. And really having all of that kind of in one place so your IT staff doesn't have to do a lot of different things. And that centralized architecture has that's where all your visibility is into your applications. That's where your monitoring and your troubleshooting, uh, all in one place. It's all cloud managed because it's not just your normal workforce that's working remote now. It's your IT staff. So your IT staff is having to support remote users as they're remote, um, which can be easy, can be difficult at times. But that easy to use architecture that Aruba brings to the customers is really ideal for that.
Definitely. And I think kind of with the easy to use architecture, I think our next point about end user ease of use, those kind of play on each other. I mean, I know as an end user myself, it's definitely been an adjustment, and I have had some adaptations to make as I've worked remotely. And I think that keeping in mind that sort of that ease of access, and everybody kind of wants it to just be moving from your desk to your home with no hangups. I think that's a really important thing to think about for your network. So, Jake, can you speak a little bit just to overall considerations to make with your network when thinking about end users and taking them into consideration?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think you have to really take in consideration, you want to make this solution, you want to make the way they connect back to your corporate network as easy for them as possible. I think we've hit on it a few times before, but if you, the least you can do is disrupt the end user's workflow from day to day. So if you give them this ability to access the corporate resources remotely, it needs to be simple, it needs to be quick, efficient, and really easy to understand. And I think Aruba's really done a really good job of bringing the same mindset, not only from an IT security architecture standpoint, but also bringing, you connect exactly the same way as you do remotely. You connect to the same SSID wirelessly. You just plug into those physical ports that Russ showed, and it's pretty painless as long as and these are template based, so it's really just a cookie cut solution where if you got 5 users going and you add another 5, it's really not a burden to really anyone to get that going.
Right.
Definitely. Russ?
Yeah, I mean, home use, you're going to have a wide variance of, I'm going to say, IT savvy of your workforce. You're going to have, some people that can go home and do a lot of things, and other people that that may struggle with, how do you configure, connect, etc. Having that solution that really gives them the exact same environment and feel that they have in their office at their home is vital to success in that. And that's where, so we have one customer I'll use just as an example. They've always had a remote workforce. So that's why our solution was in place long before the pandemic. But every one of their remote users would get one of these, a remote access point. This is a zero-touch provisioning device. That connected to their home network. It goes out to the internet, goes into Aruba Central, downloads its configuration. There's no interaction needed from the end user. There's no interaction needed from your IT staff. And then the nice thing is from once this is in their home office, you may have people that don't even have wireless devices. So it's the customer I'm talking about. They'll send an IP phone home with every user. They'll send a printer home with every user, and a laptop home with every user. There's no configuring the printer for home networks because you just take the printer and you connect it into one of the points in the remote access point solution. Same thing with a voice over IP phone. And then you take the laptop that is most likely already configured for the corporate SSID at the office. They take that home and they see the exact same SSID. So from their standpoint, that they haven't done anything at home that they wouldn't be doing at the office every day. and they have all the same access. All they have to do is take this one solution home, plug it up, plug all the corporate devices into it, and they're off and running. So I think, you know, having the zero touch provisioning piece of it, having that in-office experience and connectivity familiarity, no special configurations for anything, yeah, is really vital. So that way, you know, like Jake said, you don't want a disruption. You want your people to be just as effective from home as they are from the office. So you want to remove anything that could possibly add to those distractions or issues.
Yeah, definitely. As easy as possible is the most
Right.
important thing. I think that our last point here is something that we've kind of touched on throughout the presentation, but we'll kind of hit on it a little bit more here is, you know, obviously this is a hybrid situation, right? So it's both in-person and remote work. And secondly, I think that there are some businesses that are, you know, planning on going back to full-time in-person work once the pandemic improves a little bit. So those are also some considerations to make about your network is, you know, this is going to be not just remote, but also in person, and making those considerations of, you know, when you come back into the office, how is that going to affect your network because of that sort of back and forth between remote and in person, and having solutions that, you know, work for your business and make sure that everything is staying secure and that it's somewhat easy to come from home to the office. I think that's really important for the network. So Jake, I'll have you speak to that first.
Sure. Yeah, like Russ was talking about, remote, really where the scenario where he has some users bringing back those remote access points into the office and hanging them as regular access points in the office. I think it's important to also highlight that I think this out of this remote workforce too, a lot of people might be looking for a new office space. Say you had 20 remote users using these remote labs. You could have those users move into your new office space, hang up these new laps, plug them in, and you really have a new branch up and running with not a whole lot of effort. I think that's pretty unique in the space, and I think that brings a lot of flexibility, not only to the IT and user staff, but also from a CapEx and OpEx model. I think that really brings home the flexibility of the product and what you can do with it.
Absolutely. Russ, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see two things depending upon your business. I mean, even, you know, Aruba, our corporate headquarters office, you know, is a place where the employees went every day. You know, we've already talked about going to that hybrid scenario where people are going to be working from home some days a week and then coming into the office, you know, other days for meetings or situations where you need to collaborate. And again, having the Aruba solution in place, you know, that they're going to be able to take their devices from home to the corporate office seamlessly. And I think that's vital. You know, you're not having to take that device and go home and say, okay, now I've got to configure this, and I've got to change these things to have access. You're just going to be seamlessly going from a home workplace to your office. And then there are other places that are going to say, you know what, okay, we're safe. We need everybody to come back in. You know, Aruba, not only do we pride ourselves in working with other vendors, we also pride ourselves in providing investment protection for our customers. The same hardware that your workforce could be using from a hybrid workplace and a home office, when it's time for everybody to come back in, that exact same hardware can be brought in. The access point that I showed you is one that's it's meant to be mounted on a wall, basically where your network jacks would be. You can take that exact same hardware, you know, as your workforce comes back in, redeploy that into your office spaces, and just be off and running. You know, you're not, again, you don't have to do anything new. There's no new hardware and deployments. You really get to take the solution you have and use it as makes the most sense for what you need. So that's I think another huge advantage for what we do.
Definitely. All right. Well, so I think we can sort of start to wrap up here, but I think, you know, this is a great statistic. 70% of workers are, expecting to be productive from anywhere. That's kind of the world that we're looking at in the future, right? Is whether they're traveling or working from home or working in the office, it's important to be able to accomplish things and be productive wherever you are. So, Russ, I think I'll have you kind of wrap it and just sort of give me your final thoughts on just the general considerations that need to be made for your network as we're kind of looking ahead to the future and how work is going to be set up from now on.
Right. Well, I think this is true. If you really think about everything going to the cloud, networks are no longer isolated to a single location. They're spread out. Whether you have resources in the cloud or in your data centers, your employees are all over the place. So it's really vitally important to have or to provide that consistent experience with the ability to really seamlessly transition from a home office to a corporate office, to anywhere they may be. So it's you've got to have a tried and true partner. You've got to have somebody that hasn't come up with a solution in the last year. You need somebody that has had the solution in place for over 10 years to really enable that and go towards the cloud and go towards a distributed situation from a management point, but distributed from where the devices are, but centralized from how you're managing it. And Aruba's consistently shown that and displayed that we have that solution for that. And then the other vitally important part is that having the hardware solution is one thing, but it's a necessity to have a partner like NetGain that has experience with it, because everybody's situation is a little different. And NetGain, Jake talked about his years of experience with design and deployments. You need somebody with that type of experience to help you roll it out the way it needs to be rolled out and help you deploy it in the way that makes the most sense for you. Aruba's always had a motto of customer first, customer last. And that's just because we're very customer focused, and having a partner like NetGain, really to drive that mentality home is vitally important.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Those nice words. Jake, your general thoughts on just what organizations should be considering about their networks as we move forward with this hybrid workplace.
Yeah, I think a colleague of mine says it best when he says, think of a remote workplace as building roads for your users to access their data and the applications they need. That's just part of it, but you also have to have a solution in place, like an Aruba solution that provides the traffic cop and the scaling and the rerouting of traffic that makes those roadways more reliable and more directions more reliable. Just like Google Maps might redirect you somewhere. Aruba does a really good job of redirecting you to another route if that's a better path. And I think that's been extremely highlighted in this last year with everybody working from home. You have the best quality possible working from home and most reliability that you possibly can get out of that roadway.
Yeah, I think that is an awesome analogy. So, all right, well, I'm going to give everyone just a second here, just last call for questions. As we kind of get into that, I would like to just launch one more poll, just asking the audience, how can we help you meet your goals using business technology? So you can go ahead and just click your answer on the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and get started and read out some of our questions here. So let's see. All right. I'm going to throw this one to Jake. Someone's asking, if you could just speak a little bit more to the security and the security policy, what does that look like in terms of just kind of coming up with something to keep the network secure? So Jake, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'll take a little bit of Russ's analogy that he used with the printers. So I think it's important to just like traditional ways, you would say that certain users belong to certain groups, like you have a sales group or an IT group or a marketing group, and those users have certain access. Um, Policy kind of starts from there as a baseline, but also you have to extend it to um, is this does this user have a phone, for instance, is a personal phone or is it a corporate phone? Do we want that phone to be able to access corporate resources, or do we just want them to give them basic internet? Just like a printer too, you don't want a printer to have free roam over your network. You might want to write policy around that to where that printer can only talk to the print server. Those are the type of things you need to start shifting to as far as the security mindset is. What device, what does this device need, regardless of who's authenticated to it, but also who, depending on who authenticates to that device or uses that device, what do they have access to? Just kind of combining policies that you might have wrote in the past. You're making more complex, logical decisions. I think that's the big shift and something you need to think about.
Absolutely. Russ, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's great. Especially in the offices, we're looking at IoT type devices, but that mindset spreads out. You've got to again give access to what it needs access to. But as devices get compromised, they usually try to talk to things they're not supposed to have access to. So as you have devices at home, that being able to make sure that that a compromised device that is outside your building doesn't have access to anything that it's not supposed to have access to.
Yeah, definitely. Having those blocks up to make sure there's no unnecessary access for sure. I think we've got one more question here. Someone's asking, with Azure and the cloud and all of that, a lot of people are using Azure now. This person's asking how that the remote access points integrate with Azure. So Russ, why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, so the solution, first off, we integrate with Azure and AWS, both from a VPN termination standpoint. So if you're talking about a remote access point or even via clients, our VPN client, you can deploy a concentrator into either AWS or Azure. And then you have that traffic encrypted end to end all the way to your resources that are deployed in the cloud. Likewise, our ClearPass solution can be deployed in both of those cloud providers as well. So it really allows you to, as you're migrating away from brick and mortar and data centers resources to cloud-based resources, we integrate directly in with those.
Great, excellent. All right, well, those are all the questions we have, unless anyone wants to submit one last minute, but I think that we've covered everything. So I just want to say thank you so much to Jake and Russ for sharing your expertise with us today. If you have any questions or would like to contact us about the Aruba solutions and look into a demo or just maybe a little bit more in depth, or if you have any other questions surrounding your network, IT, just any technology needs, feel free to reach out to us at the contact information on the screen, and we will get back to you and see how we can help you. But thanks again to Jake and Russ for joining us and giving us some information today. Thank you everyone in the audience for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.